Hi guys, and welcome to this third tutorial in rigging. If you need to refresh your minds on what we covered last week, go ahead and check out last week's tutorial. If you feel ready to move on to the next thing, let's get started. So today we're going to be covering a few different things. We're going to be covering Maya's Quick Rig tool. We'll also be doing a little bit of an introduction to skin weights and smoothing skin in Maya. Let's get started. So one really good thing for practicing rigging in Maya is something called the content browser. And if you go to Windows, up here, General Editors, Content Browser, we can open this up. And what the content browser has for sculpting is it has all of these models that we can use, basic meshes. And these can be used as a basic mesh for characters, or we're going to use them just for practicing our rigging skills. So you've got animals, you've got humanoid figures, clothing, props, weapons, all kinds of stuff. We're going to go into bipeds, and we're going to pick one of these human characters. I wouldn't recommend picking the werewolf just because the legs are set up quite differently. I'm just going to use this human body. So I'm just going to double click on that, and that's going to open it up in my Maya. Right, I'm going to close the browser. Now it's quite big, so I'm just going to scale it down. So I'm going to select my mesh. I'm going to go to scale, and I'm just going to scale him down. Now, if you go to the channel box, you can see the effect that I've had on the scale. So I'm just going to reset that by going to Polymodeling. Just make sure you're in the Polymodeling tab. Then you've got these three blue options. We're not going to center the pivot. We're just going to delete the history and freeze the transformations. And you can see that resets my scale to 1. Just resets the model, and it's a good place to start. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Maya Quick Rig tool. So what that does is Maya can generate a skeleton and a whole rig setup with controllers and everything, IK handles for this figure. Now it only really works with humanoid figures, and it makes quite a simple rig. It's not a custom rig, so it's not going to work for everything, but it is quite a useful thing to know about because it can save you an awful lot of time. So let's select my character, and I'm going to go to skeleton, and I'm going to go down here to quick rig. Now before you can click on skeleton, you need to make sure that you're in the rigging tab, because these options at the top will change as opposed to what tab you're in. So make sure that you're in rigging, go to skeleton, quick rig. And this little option box appears. And there's two kind of separate options. There's a one-click option and there's a step-by-step. First of all, we're just going to stick with one click. And I'm just going to, with my character selected, click Auto Rig. Okay, that can take a little bit of time to render. But what that's doing now is Maya is kind of trying to work out how to rig this character. And you can see it's created joints, it's created controllers. That should now, I'm going to close this option box now. That should now be a functioning character. And we can move the controllers around. And we can go ahead and animate this straight away if we wanted. However, you can see the quick rig is not perfect. This wrist joint isn't quite in the right place. Maya's done its best, but this is a little bit low down. It's below the wrist really. This is almost in the hand itself. And you can see the same for the elbow joint. That's not quite in the right place either. Mostly everything else looks fine, but have a little look and see what Maya's done. You can see that this joint for the knee is quite far forward, but that's actually where it's supposed to be. Joints for the knee are not in the middle of the leg. It's quite far forward. When you're rigging, it's a good idea to look at a real skeleton, and you can get a sense about where things should move. These joints for the shoulders are a bit low down. They should be a bit higher up. But other than that, it mostly looks fine. It's mostly the arms then that's the problem. Now we can fix this. And to fix it, we're going to use the step-by-step quick rig option. Okay, so what we'll do is we shall go to skeleton once again, quick rig, bring that option box back up. And rather than selecting one click, we're going to select step by step. Now you can see that everything's grayed out. So initially we need to add a character. So I'm just going to click this little square here, quick rig character. Now step one, we need to add the geometry or the mesh to the quick rig tool. So let's select the character first, and then we can just hit this little add. Right, let's collapse geometry because that's done. The next is step 2, and that's adding guides. So guides is going to help Maya place the joints. So we're just going to click create update. Make sure you're in perfect mesh. Everything else looks fine. Create update. Okay, so Maya is now generating those guides, and we can see where the one-click quick rig went wrong. You can see this joint down here. This one is here. So we're going to move those around. I'm just going to drag the quick rig to the corner, and I'm going to go into an orthographic view. I'm going to do that by clicking my spacebar and going into front view. Okay, the knees look correct. It's just that wrist. So I'm going to select it, I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to move it up to the wrist. Now I've got to do it on the other side as well, but there is actually a mirror tool here, so you can see this with arrows. One's got an arrow going left, one's got an arrow going right. I want to mirror this joint right. So if I click that, I'm just going to hit that arrow that's going left, and it's mirrored across to the left. I can do the same with the other one. If I move that up, and I'll mirror it across to the right, and you can see the same thing happens. I'm going to lift up these shoulder joints. I'm going to put the guide right up there, maybe a little bit lower, and I'm going to mirror it across. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to lift up these as well. There we go. I'm just going to go into a side view, so I'm just going to hit spacebar again. Go to the side view. I'm actually going to bring that knee joint forward a tiny bit. Mirror it across. Okay, so the elbow joint I'm going to move across a little bit. Mirror that. Everything else looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to go into perspective view and just check it all out, make sure it looks all right. Yep, that looks good to me. So I'm going to collapse the user guide adjustment, and I'm going to go to skeleton and rig generation. So that is going to generate a skeleton and also a control rig. So if I click create update, that is now going to generate the bones and the joints. That looks great. There's only one thing left to do, and that is to skin bind. So that's going to bind the mesh to the joints. Let's click create update. Boom. That is done. I can close my quick rig. And you now should be able to see it should be working correctly. So we have our rigged character, and for the most part it's moving correctly. But there are still a few problems. So for example, when I rotate this shoulder, you can see we're having a bit of influence that we don't want here under the armpit. You can see that the joints from the arm is influencing and pulling this skin, which is not what we want. We want this part of the mesh to be purely influenced by the spine, really. We don't want to be having deformations here. So this is where we get into skin weights and skin smoothing. And there's two ways we can fix this. One is by using something called painting weights, which is a little bit more complex, and we will get into that in a future tutorial. But another way, which I think is a bit easy and a bit of a better introduction to skin weights, is using the component editor. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select the vertices here under the armpit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to vertices. So I'm just selecting the mesh, holding down left click to bring up the marking menu and going into vertex mode. And you can see all the individual vertices that our shape is made up of. I'm going to use the lasso tool and we're just going to select these vertices that are causing the issue. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Windows, we're going to go to General Editors, and we're going to go down to the Component Editor just there. I'm going to click on that. Now that brings up this dialog box, and there's a lot of different tabs. We're going to scroll along until we come to Smooth Skins. Now this looks very complicated. It's not, I promise you. On the left, we've got all the vertices that we've selected. Not every vertex in the mesh, but just the ones that we have selected. Along the top of these columns is what is influencing those vertices. So we can see that what we want is we've got the spine influencing those vertices, but we've also got some things that we don't want, like the right arm, and that's what's causing that stretch. So I'm going to select the right arm, and I'm just going to start something at the top, holding down my left click. I'm going to just get to the top, drag select all of these right down to the bottom, and then I'm going to type in 0 on my keyboard, and I'm just going to hit enter. You can see that column's vanished because it's no longer relevant. It's no longer influencing those vertices in any way. The next thing is we're going to grab the shoulder, and I'm going to do the same thing. I don't want the right shoulder influencing anything. So do the same. That is now gone. I don't think the neck needs to influence it. Now this is often a bit of trial and error. You might need to go back, you might have to change your selection of vertices depending on what actually happens. But let's get rid of those. Let's get rid of the left shoulder as well. And we'll leave the rest. We'll leave the hips, the spine, and we'll get rid of that. Now we'll see what effect that's had. We need to go back into object mode, so holding down left click, go back to object mode. Select that shoulder. And you can see that's now no longer affecting the torso. And it looks a lot more natural than this one on the left. So we would have to do that again on the left. But that is a bit of an introduction to the component editor, and hopefully that's useful. So for today's final task, we're going to be looking at animating our character. But this time, rather than creating a walk cycle, like we did last time, I want you to create a run cycle. Now the main difference between a run cycle and a walk cycle is that a run cycle is we're moving more efficiently. There's more momentum, we're moving faster. And as a result, unlike a walk cycle, there is no time when both feet are touching the ground. So you can see the difference between the contact poses here. Only one foot is touching the ground at a time. So just like with our walk cycle, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our contact poses. So the contact pose, first we have one leg touching the ground, the back leg up. That will be the same as the end of our animation because we want it to loop. And then in the middle, we have our contact pose, which is the opposite way around, the back leg forward, the front leg back. Let's create that now. So first of all, we're going to try and start with our character in a bit more of a good position. So we'll rotate the hips forward, so it's leaning forward. We'll start, I think, with this leg forward, but you can start with either leg forward. This back leg will be back. We'll rotate the ankle. We shall move one arm forward and one arm back. You can of course do anything with the arms that you like, but it's nice to have one arm forward and one leg back, and then one arm forward and one back, and then reverse it for the other contact pose. So we'll have this leg back, this arm back. So we'll have this arm back, and that looks good. So we will select all of our controllers. I'm going to turn off X-ray joints because I don't need to see the joints, and I'm just going to hit S on my keyboard, and I'm going to go to the end of my timeline. I'm going to hit S again, and I'm going to go to the middle of my timeline, which is going to be about frame 60, and then I'm going to create the other contact pose. So I'm going to move this leg forward. Let's rotate that ankle because it looks a little broken. And let's move the other leg back. And we'll rotate the ankle again. Lift it off the ground. Hit. And we shall do the same with the arm. So we'll rotate the arm back to reverse it. We will rotate the other arm forward. We shall drag select. Wait, we'll just rotate that arm out a bit. There we go. Drag select all of our controllers and hit S again on the keyboard. And we should create the classic kind of skiing kind of look, where there's no passing animation. I'm going to add a little bit of rotation to the hips. So when this leg comes forward, he'll rotate a little bit that way. There we go. Right, now we need to look at the passing animations. So he needs to lift his leg off the ground as it comes forward, just the same as in the walk cycle. And the other leg needs to come down to touch the floor. So this one needs to come down. Let's rotate the ankle. This one needs to be lifted up, pushed forward a little. And we'll select all of our controllers and hit S. Brilliant. So now as this leg comes forward, this leg needs to straighten down. This leg needs to come up. Let's select all the controllers and hit S. Now the hips are remaining, apart from that little twist, are remaining consistent, which is not what we want. So in the passing pose, as usual, we want to straighten it up, just as we do with the walk cycle. We want to straighten them up a little bit. Let's go to the other passing pose. Straighten him up a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of animation to his head. So as he's passing, his head might go back a little bit. And on this one too. Let's roll his head back a bit. So this is beginning to come together. Let's speed it up very slightly. So we're just going to drag, holding down left click, drag select, and holding down shift as well on the keyboard. Drag select the whole timeline. And we're just going to drag it just to make it a bit faster. Okay, that looks good. We'll make it 71 frames long, the timeline. Okay. When he slams this leg down, let's squash him down a bit more. Roll that forward a bit. And we'll do the same with this. So we'll just squash him down a tad more. And we'll take that, copy, and paste it to the end. We'll delete that other keyframe. Move that keyframe to its original position. So this is my run cycle. It's still quite rough, but have a go, see what you can come up with. I shall see you in the next exercise.